Dennis McCann lectured about this old sanitarium about exactly a year ago today. So we are really happy to have him back. He's an author and a writer, and he had this great idea of talking about old time rec in Bayfield. So we'll go over a lot of things in kind of 1880s to about the centennial time, so that period. And also, thank you to our media guy for extensive photo research. We have a lot of photos here, and to find these certain events, I'd like to thank Tony Jeanette for helping us with that, because it was a lot of work for everyone. So, without further ado, I'll have Dennis come up. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming out today. I was thinking it was almost too nice a day, and there's too much going on, but we'll do the best we can. In her book about the evolution of early Bayfield, my friend and good friend of BHA, Mary Carlson, made a really interesting observation. After an extensive description of the challenges facing early residents, from geographic isolation to loneliness that's inevitable in a remote community with sometimes insufferable winters, limited economic opportunity, dirt streets, and on, Mary also wrote, "But if the life of the early settlers sounds difficult, the grim look on the faces in the early photographs belies the fact that these people knew how to party." There were tea parties and picnics, card games, debates, dinner parties, and dances that lasted well into the early morning hours. In the winter, large groups would travel by sleigh across the ice to La Pointe and Ashland for overnight visits. There was skating on the frozen lake and sledding down snow-covered streets. Men and women both would go out on the lake to fish or to row a boat just for fun, and large groups of people occasionally packed a couple of sleighs for overnight fishing parties. And that and more is what we're here to look at today. Bayfield was a hardworking town in the early days. It still is, although in different ways. And that's likely what made it so necessary that there would also be a need for diversions and entertainments of every sort. When there is near isolation, it is imperative that there also be socialization. So we'll look at some of those entertainments, and I'll try to include enough variety to prove Mary's point and perhaps to entertain you as well. On New Year's Day in 1870, just 14 years after the town was officially created, William Knight described how Bayfield celebrated another turning of the calendar page. Everybody kept open house with their tables loaded with every good thing to eat and drink. The men went in groups of 4 and 5 and visited every house and found the tables all set and decorated for the occasion, with their best silverware and cut glass and pot flowers. The ladies of the house were dressed in their silks and satins, all ready to receive and offer their best eats and drinks. You were expected to at least sample everything, and it was considered your best foot forward to do so. Places of entertainment came and went, too often because a rogue spark ignited a fire that put a hard halt to all the fun, but usually only temporarily. Something always seemed to come on to offer new stages for both local amateurs and traveling professionals. When the Island View Hotel opened in 1883, it was touted as the largest hostelry in northern Wisconsin. And it became the center not only for tourism in those early years, but for civic and social events for Bayfield residents as well. When the hotel burned in 1887, a new structure was built to take its place, and so an opening ball was held in July. The hotel closed in 1900, but reopened in 1904 in time for the city's 50th anniversary, when it hosted a lavish anniversary dinner and dance for 200 people. In 1885, Curry Bell declared that the city needed a roller skating rink, and so it was built, a 2-story rink with a floor 50 by 100 feet, and on the second level, galleries so that non-skaters could look in on the action. That building was later converted to a rink and a theater with a commodious stage fitted up with scenery for concerts and theatrical performances. Traveling companies would visit Bayfield and offer their entertainment, but local performers used it as well. In 1909, the facility began showing movies to give local folks one more entertainment option. Roller skating remained a popular activity for many years. In her reminiscences of growing up here, Connie Frostman Marcy described what it was like at the pavilion, where in fact her parents had met as teenagers. Inside the rink, kids were skating to the music, going in circles, forwards, backwards, and sometimes making uncoordinated and embarrassingly loud contact with the floor or walls, all generally having fun. Those not skating would be outside, leaning against the window openings, trying to talk to friends over the music and the rumble of white and black wheels spinning on the hardwood floor. Church suppers were also popular activities. At one supper in 1890, it was reported the ladies who served were attired in the styles of our great-grandmothers, and the transformation of dress a century back was so complete it was difficult to recognize the wearers. Social gatherings of this kind have now become quite the rage, and they certainly add to the attractiveness of life and aid a good cause. Various social organizations came and went through the years. Very early on, the Pleasant Hours Club was offering dramatic entertainment for its members. The Maccabees organization flourished after 1910. In 1908, the press noted, the ladies of the Maccabees enjoyed a sleigh ride to James Stewart's camp at Raspberry Bay. Mr. Stewart treated the ladies to a supper that made their home-cooked meals look like 30 cents. I don't know what that means. It looked like 30 cents, but... There was also the Salmo Club, which was founded in 1913 and known for such songs as Salmo, the Little Club of Human Kindness. And then there was the Tuesday Club, which was founded on Arbor Day in 1909. That happened to be a Friday, but members settled on Tuesdays as a better meeting day, so Tuesday Club it was. Members played bridge and handed out trees for planting and had so much fun they decided to meet twice a month. It was reported that the Tuesday Club is a club of friendship. During the early years, it was a sewing club, but the members found that darning their husband's socks while they visited was quite boring, and they switched entirely to bridge. But the manner in which Bayfield residents filled their leisure hours was often much simpler. To get a more complete view of what went on, I chose a year at random, 1916, and went through every brittle issue of the Bayfield County Progress, which at that time had an editor who apparently considered such activity as most newsworthy. In January, Olaf England's store was advertising a full range of sleds and skis, noting the stiff bite of winter speeds up the demand for such things. Early that month was described as a merry sleighing party that went away to L. Grady's Spruce Grove Farm in the town of Russell, its members spending a few hours most delightfully. The movie showing that month at the Princess Theater starred Robert Warwick in The Face in the Moonlight, about a French aristocrat who loved Jean Malachy, a peasant girl, but was compelled to marry her cousin Alice instead. Jean died early and left behind a son, who was then kidnapped and raised by a gang of ruffians, while Alice's son Victor, receiving every advantage, was raised as an aristocrat. 20 years later, Victor became captain of the King's Army, while his half-brother Robert had degenerated into a criminal. Strangely enough, they looked exactly alike, though Robert was ignorant of Victor's existence. So Robert committed a murder, but Victor's fiancée mistakenly thought it was him who'd done the killing, and then all sorts of complications ensue. Admission was 10 cents, which was pretty good for all that melodrama. On January 20th, Bayfield Ice Rink was declared ready for skaters. The rink was near the Omaha Depot, where management had prepared a skating surface cleared of snow that was, quote, in fine trim for those who enjoy the sport and the exercise of the skating. The cost was 10 cents for kids and 15 cents for adults, the paper reported. Now then, boys and girls, youths and maidens, men and women, come along and enjoy yourself. On January 28th, there was to be a leap year party at the Opera House, and its promoters are planning to make it an exceptionally enjoyable event with a 6-piece orchestra for music and dancing. That week's movie at the Princess was After Dark, and as a special attraction, the Lawn Tennis Club was present to vaudeville, singing and dancing in costume, and there were violin solos as well. Sports was certainly a pleasant diversion, especially in winter. That month, the Ashland boys beat the Bayfield boys in basketball, following a street concert by the Ashland High School band. The paper noted, probably no connoisseur would class this visiting aggregation with Sousa's or the Marine Band, but there aren't any connoisseurs here. Simple house parties were very popular, though they didn't always involve eager hosts opening their doors for friends and neighbors. Often the party seekers invited themselves. From the Progress, Mrs. Michael Schließ was taken by surprise Monday when a company of friends invaded her home. Why 'twas done we have not learned, but we are told that the event proved very happy for hostess and guests. And there was Mrs. Lawrence Garrity, who was given a happy surprise Monday evening when a large company of friends paid an en masse visit at the home of her parents. I just picture, Ma in her nightgown and Pa in his cap looking at a nap, and 20 people show up at the door, ready to eat your food and drink your drink. In March, the Progress reports the dancing party at the Catholic school hall hosted by the St. Cecilia Club was wondrously successful. The attendance was in the neighborhood of 200, and they were just about the merriest 200 that ever gathered at such an affair in Bayfield. The Progress said the old bloods danced the old-fashioned dances that made the young bloods turn shamrock green with envy. But a lot of parties were wondrously successful, even the surprise parties. That same month, the press reported 35 friends perpetrated complete surprise Saturday evening upon Mr. and Mrs. Al Welsh. In a mass, those friends invaded the Welsh house, announcing their presence by singing "Happy Birthday." They danced until midnight, when the entire party relocated to the Air and Harmony home for an elegant supper before going back to the Welsh home for more dancing. "'Twas near the peep of day ere the party dissolved," the paper said. As the year went on, there were lots of fun events. Men often gathered for smokers. The Epworth League held a measuring party with a literary and musical program, although exactly who or what got measured was never explained. In May, the Beavers Ball was held at the courthouse, and the attendance was rather too large for the hall. Many came from Washburn to share in the good time that always comes when the greater part of the dances are the old-fashioned dances. In October, the Civic League hosted the most successful and enjoyable social event of the year that was crowded to capacity. The paper noted how the leagues of other more pretentious cities are attempting to ape the Bayfield League in public matters. At the event, old-fashioned dancing was indulged in until all were satisfied. Too many of these get-together meetings cannot be held in any community. But there was another event that summer that the entire region got involved in, and that was the first Bayfield Chautauquas, the early Bayfield Chautauquas. The first program had been held in 1915, so the organizers ramped up the schedule for the next year to try and outdo it. On the opening day, the lineup included a 30-piece university band, a lecture on the playground of life, children's story hour, another lecture, and an evening concert. Other days featured the Milton College Glee Club, the Dvorak Quartet, and the Hampton Quartet, which the schedule noted was a colored act. Excellent weather, solid lineups, and large daily attendance made the event a great red-letter week for Little Bayfield. And to show how the community was beginning to change, a total of 247 motor cars were counted that week, which showed that the remoteness of Little Bayfield was about to change. It's inevitable when you read a year's worth of newspapers looking for certain things, you'll find things that interest you that you didn't know that you were looking for. I was reading along and I saw a headline declaring "Aged Lady Dies," and I thought that was interesting. The aged lady was Mrs. Emma Lindbaum, born 1842 and died in 1916. I did the math. She was 74. I was 75 when I read that. Aged man, apparently. If the Civic League was the envy of other more pretentious communities, there was good reason. The organization was founded in 1913 to provide both cultural and pure entertainment events, and it was successful on both fronts. In the 1920s, there was no more successful Civic League accomplishment than the annual Frolic, which one year was described in the Progress as 3 days during which shows, music, confetti, and everything in the line of fun-making will be the general order of things. Planning for the 1920 Frolics took place over a period of months as organizers attempted to top the previous year's successful event. The Progress noted that participants should expect performances that were attractive, short, and full of snap. Every effort is being put forth to give the public a week of fun, and every cent will not only help lessen the indebtedness the League has shouldered, but will never be regretted by its spender, for everyone is going to get his money's worth. So come one and all from far and wide, from city, town, and countryside, we'll welcome you to our frolic gay and entertain you in every way. With 2 weeks to go before the event, promoters organized a promise that for 15 cents admission, you can take in the big show. Singing and dancing acts, comedy, acrobatic acts, minstrels, and so on will be presented for your entertainment and amusement. Listen, you can have a crazy time in the funhouse. See the fairies in the well, pretty fairies, airy fairies. See the zoo, ride on the camel's back, and don't forget the swimming match. A motorcade of 25 automobiles was dispatched from Bayfield to Ashland to promote the frolic. which turned into the most successful fundraiser the league ever mounted. People came in droves to see the stage shows and the side shows and poke through booths with merchandise. By Saturday night, the hall was so packed that people were turned away. And one Bayfield man said later on, it cost him 10 cents to get in and $25 to get out. The league eventually raised enough money to buy Memorial Hall to host dances, movies, lecture, and other entertainments. The league applied their feminine talents for cooking to money raising and have done that all their years of activity, one account said. In fact, if the thousands of dishes the league members have washed and dried were stacked up, they would reach into the clouds. And if that stack ever toppled, there would be a flying saucer for everybody. The league did, however, keep an eye on just what kind of entertainment its fungoers could have, especially at dances. At the 1921 meeting, a motion was made and carrying that cheek-to-cheek dancing, the shimmy, and any other undesirable dances that might be invented would not be allowed. They apparently anticipated twerking a century early. On the other hand, the league also arranged for Bayfield kids to take dance lessons, perhaps as a way to prime the pump for the future. The women's league got most of the attention, but in fairness to the men, for a time there was an active men's club in Bayfield. At the 1924 club meeting, members provided their own entertainment. Joe O'Malley performed a dance number, which leads us to believe he lies about his age. Bill Miller put on his famous war whoop dance, all togged up in a gaily colored bathrobe and a hatchet covered with gore. Dr. Martins gave 2 French dialect readings. Kenneth Ellis recited The Last Show in Plumville, Texas, while Johnny Sales amused everyone with his Swedish dialect singing. Shine Miller pulled his popular peg leg number, and Don Bell killed the session with a basso rendition of Annie Laurie. Good times all around, man. One annual occasion for fun for all was 4th of July, which from the city's earliest days was always a cause for celebration. Maybe part of the reason was that many residents had moved to America from other countries, so they felt a special attachment to their new land. Or it could be that they just wanted a reason to party, which Bayfield was always eager to embrace. In his book, Lake Superior Country and History and Story, Guy Burnham recalled Captain Pike decorating his scow for the 4th of July with a row of balsam trees nailed around the outside and several clumps of balsam in the middle. The whole town was invited for the trip. The Bayfield City Cornet Band furnished the music. It was a beautiful day and a wonderful trip, and was enjoyed as much as any auto trip could possibly be enjoyed in these days. For the 4th of July in 1872, the Ashland Press reported that the schooner Maple Leaf, captained by Captain Larson, gave an excursion trip among the islands, and many of our citizens participated. The weather being pleasant and the vessel commodious, the ride was enjoyed by all. Mr. McElroy favored the excursionists with one of his characteristic speeches, which was attentively listened to. That evening, there was another boat to Red Cliff and back before the fun seekers adjourned to meet at the residence of S.S. Vaughn, where a few hours were enjoyed in the social dance. Regular salutes were fired during the day. And to make a long story short, the 4th of July was observed in fine style in the harbor city. The 1878 celebration was even bigger. The Bayfield Rifle Company's noisy little brass cannon began firing at 4 a.m. and woke us by pouring volley after volley all out on the morning air, the paper said. The press answered their salute by firing off a half bunch of firecrackers. At 9 o'clock, the Rifle Company and those of our citizens who wished to go got on the big scow belonging to Captain Wheeler, which was gaily decked with flags and evergreens, and were towed over to La Pointe. When nearing La Pointe, the riflemen fired several salutes to the citizens of the ancient village, who responded with cheers. The long day continued into the evening when the riflemen held a large ball where all went merry as a marriage bell, and they didn't go home until morning. Take it all in all, it was the most pleasant 4th of July Bayfielders have enjoyed in a year. And not to nitpick, but that was the only one they've enjoyed in a year. In 1889, the lineup for the 4th featured a baseball game between the Fats and the Leans. It was reported that the combined weights of the Fats was 1,779 pounds, which sounds pretty darn fat until you divide it 9 ways. Bayfield was not the only community to celebrate the 4th in style, of course. Bob Dahl, whose family lived and worked on Sand Island, recalled how the holiday was celebrated at Little Sand Bay in the 1950s. His family would clean up his father's fish tug and head for the mainland, where the activities were centered at Herman and Ag's Bar. Hardly a gala by today's standard. During my childhood fourths, families got together and picnicked and played games, he said. At the same time, some adults and some not so adults drank beer and other libations of the store-bought or homemade variety. There were games for kids, a sack race, a three-legged race, wheelbarrow races. The prize for each game was $2, a considerable sum in the age of nickel beers, as Dahl put it. So competition was fierce, if not a little unsportsmanlike. The prize for the greased pole climb was a $5 bill that was tacked to the top of the pole. And the greased pig contest, the winner got the prize of the pig. At 8 o'clock, the music would begin at Hermie's Bar, compliments of Tiny and his toe tappers, and a party that ensued had little to do with Independence Day. But the specialness of the day was not lost in all the fun. No speeches, no fireworks, no marching bands, Dahl recalled later. Even in isolated Bayfield County, people felt a part of the United States of America as much as anyone else in the country. Despite today's pomp and circumstance, not to mention spectacular fireworks, I'd give anything to once again experience those simple celebrations in Little Sand Bay. I mentioned baseball a few minutes ago. As it was all across the country at that time, in the end of the 19th century, America's pastime was very popular in Bayfield. Bob Nelson has compiled a lot of the history that I was able to consult, so I thank him for that. As early as 1878, the press reported that baseball is now all the rage. A club with a first and second nine has been organized, and every afternoon the boys were practicing. A lively match may be looked for as soon as our neighbors across the bay, meaning in Ashland, get up their club. So late in March of that year was the first match of the season, in late March. So it lasted only 3 innings because of a snowstorm. By May, the Ashland boys had indeed got up their club and hosted the Bayfield boys. Baseball is still the rage, the press confirmed, and the elite of our village daily gather to witness the national game as played on the field. It wasn't only the players who enjoyed baseball. Bob found that community-wide pride and fanaticism prevailed. All packed their picnic baskets or loaded their flasks and rode the early passenger boats to Ashland to make their way in trains to the baseball grounds. Watch out, Ironwood, Rice Lake, Superior, Duluth, Ashland, Red Cliff, Hayward, Bad River, Pratt, Odana, Iron River. Here come the Bayfield city teams. But such bold talk wasn't always backed up on the diamond. In 1878, the Ashland Club came to Bayfield with a large and pleasant party numbering 40. The paper said some fine playing was indulged by both sides during the first 4 innings. But in the 5th inning, while the Ashland boys were at bat, some imp of evil seemed to seize the Bayfield boys, and they did the poorest playing that was ever seen in Bayfield. And although the Ashland Club did some very poor batting, yet they managed to score 12 runs. This was all owing to the wild throwing of the Bayfield boys, who seemed to be perfectly blind. Businessmen and merchants in the communities helped the cause by recruiting and paying players. Sometimes the occasional ringer willing to give up allegiance of a hometown and play for somebody else for more money. Does that sound familiar anymore? Some opposing teams arrived by train carrying their bats and balls and duffel bags and boarded the Bayfield Transfer Railway to the diamond that was then at Roy's Point. There later was a diamond at Frank Holston's strawberry field, but no permanent home. So in 1909, the press declared the community will have a new ballpark and said local businessmen had already formed a new organization to create a stock company, place shares on the market, and provide financial stability. A site was selected just west of the high school, and thus Lakeview Ballpark began its long run as the home of baseball here. Horses were used to plow and scrape the playing surface to ensure the diamond will be one of the fastest in northern Wisconsin. It will be clay, well packed, and as level as possible. A fence will be erected around the grounds and grandstand and bleachers built. Fans were certainly living in great anticipation of seeing some excellent baseball games that summer. Years later, there was some opposition to the ballpark up there from the high school officials, so another site was selected at 4th and Wilson. Here, the paper declared, Andy Pulaski and his teams would dominate teams from northern Wisconsin. Andy, who, of course, his name graced our grocery store for many years, was both a player and manager of the teams for years. He was also another diamond later at Big Ravine Park, but trying to play baseball where an area flood prone was problematic, so that didn't last. Eventually, the Lakeview Diamond was used again for several more decades. And Bob recalls that in 1984, Blackjack Morris, who played for the Detroit Tigers for years, came to Bayfield to watch his brother pitch in a game, and he said that Lakeview Park, with its expansive views of Lake Superior, was the most beautiful park that he'd ever seen. Fierce rivalries were established. The Ashland team arrived by train in 1903, quote, telling how they were going to do large things to the fish eaters, but they went home more quietly in defeat. Another year, Washburn and Bayfield played as part of the 4th of July celebration, and Bayfield prevailed 21-3. The Progress reported, a noticeable feature was the absence of the usual windbag who knows more about the rules and plays than the umpire, the captains, and the manager combined. The umpire was not even called up to endanger his life. At another challenging game against the Washburn team, the paper said, the lads in the box from Bayfield gritted their teeth and went at it with blood in their eye. The first half of the 6th resulted in more hen fruit for Washburn. But when Washburn later defeated the Bayfield 9, the paper declared there were extenuating circumstances. They were defeated, but not by the Washburn High School team. The defeat is clearly traceable to the umpire, a teacher in the Sawdust City schools. There are times when an umpire in a baseball game will make decisions that appear rank to the spectators, but when he continues to make them and shows without a doubt that he favors one team or the other, it's disgusting to say the least. And this appears to be just what Mr. Sawdust Cityite did all last Saturday. The press is not in a position to say the umpire maliciously robbed the boys again, but he favored the Washburn team on doubtful decisions, and the rest of the time he appeared to know nothing about umpiring a ball game. So the paper did its best to keep readers up in all the action, but when it couldn't, that was a problem. In 1878, the Bayfield boys walloped Ashland 26-2, but the press had scant details. It explained, our special reporter went down to report the game, but found after he got there he had been appointed a player in the Bayfield 9. And this spoiled the complete synopsis of the game that we intended to give. There were apparently a number of good players from this area. As early as 1900, star pitcher Jack Rivard did so well he was signed to play professionally in Milwaukee. He played for several pro teams. The Tribune once described him as a giant from the lumber region of Wisconsin, who looks as if he could throw a ball through a 4-inch plank. After a few summers in the bigs, Jack wound up playing in Bayfield again. Another very good player was Tommy Thompson. Julian Nelson once said Thompson looked like a major leaguer on the mound, always dressed to a T. He routinely pitched double headers himself with a fastball that paced like a darting pea coming to the plate, and he eventually signed with Connie Mack's Philadelphia Athletics Professional Club. Teams and leagues came and went, but the game remained popular. For a game on Bayfield Booster Day on Madeline Island in 1934, so large was the crowd interest that it required 8 boats to ferry fans to the game, despite a nor'easter that brought whitecaps to Lake Superior. In 1934, the Bayfield Cubs finished second in the Gitche Gumi League, but the next season were expected to join the Pinocchio League with other teams from Glidden, Mellon, Marengo, and other communities. By the 1970s, on the other hand, interest in the game had really waned. Bayfield did not even have a team in the upper 13 league. High school play continued, and it should not go unmentioned that in 1981, the Bayfield girls won the Class C state championship. So good for them. It seems perhaps odd that the city depended upon boats for commerce, for acquiring food and incomes, should also consider boats as entertainment. But that was always the case in Bayfield. Today we have sailboats galore and race week each July and boat blessings and pleasure boating. But even back when boats were workhorses and not show ponies, the town would often turn its eyes to the water for diversion. Regattas were common in those days where boaters could gather and compare and show off their craft and enjoy the water of Lake Superior without having to work it. I mentioned earlier how boat rides were a part of so many holiday observances. Bayfielders have long been a waterborne people. But no single boat ever drew the curious and enthusiastic fans as long as the famous Christopher Columbus, the round-hulled passenger steamer designed and promoted by Alexander McDougall, built in 1893 in Superior. There were many such distinctive whaleboats turned out there over the years, including one that is open for tours today on Barker's Island in Superior. But the Christopher Columbus was the only one specifically designed to carry passengers instead of cargo. Over 40 years, she was reported to have carried over 4 million passengers. She was best known for giving rides at the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago. But for many years, the Christopher Columbus toured the lake as well. including making 2 stops in Bayfield in 1897 that pleased not only its thousands of passengers, but every proud citizen as well. The visits drew extensive coverage throughout the North. The Bayfield County Press headline read, "The Columbus brings 2 immense excursions here from Duluth and Superior, and over 5,000 people here last Saturday and Sunday." Superior Evening Telegram described the first visit as a grand success. The big excursion steamer yesterday carried 1,600 passengers from the head of the lakes to the Apostle Islands in Bayfield, and there was not a single incident during the whole trip to mar the pleasure of the excursionists. The weather was warm and the lake was like glass for the greater part of the voyage. Good music and dancing was held in the cabin, and plenty of refreshments topped off the pleasures of the trip. Along the way, people danced, promenaded around the deck, and enjoyed the scenery of the Apostle Islands. And though they only stayed for an hour on land, they enjoyed a stroll through the small town. I'm always leery of crowd estimates, and I can't get my head around the idea of 1,600 people on a boat that wasn't even 400 feet long, even if it's several decks deep. But the next day, the Duluth News-Tribune said the crowd was 2,500 people that came. For this excursion, the Columbus took 2,500 people from Duluth and Superior over the shining bosom of Gitche-Gumee to Bayfield and back. There would have been one more passenger, but a man running late attempted to board the departing boat and ended up in the drink, much to the delight of 2,500 people. So it was entertainment for all. The whole population, apparently, of this exceedingly little town, pretty little town, was on the dock to greet the Christopher Columbus, and her reverberant whistle mingled with the music of the Duluth City Band and the cheers of citizens of Bayfield. For a visit in September of that year, there was an additional draw, because a daredevil known as Professor Patsy Deer came with a hot air balloon to attempt a launch from the deck of the Columbus while it was in the harbor here. During inflation, the balloon was held down by 15 or 20 men, but a gust of wind had other plans. It knocked over the men in the hot air balloon and set it on fire. The men let go of the ropes and the airship blew into the water, which at least extinguished the fire. Still, the paper reported considerable excitement prevailed, causing 2 ladies to faint, but fortunately no one was injured. By the next day, the craft had been mended and the ascension was successful. The balloon was inflated with additional men on hand to hold it down, and it sounded the signal to launch. The men let go and the balloon shot upward. It was one of the prettiest aeronautic performances ever seen, the Superior Evening Telegram confirmed. Suspended from the bottom of the balloon was I covered up part of the script here. Suspended from the parachute was a trapeze, and as the balloon left the dock at a rate of about 1 mile in 11 seconds, Professor Patsy Deer was seen hanging by his feet from the bar. An instant later, he reversed his position and held on by his teeth. Well, the crowd watched in hushed awe. The balloon rose and rose until the professor released a string and the parachute shot down with the professor dangling from the trapeze. The parachute opened like a huge wet canvas. He landed on Bayfield safely and the balloon was recovered. A side note on the Columbus, the Bayfield Maritime Museum Board, which includes me for what it's worth, has commissioned a large-scale model of the Columbus that will be built by a company called Stern Cashel Visualization and Miniatures. The model, the builder calls it the largest he has ever done, and it will allow visitors to see in detail what made the Columbus such an attraction. And we expect to have that in place and on display this season, if all goes well. A bit about birthday celebrations. Early on, the residents deemed it important to mark those milestones. There was a big celebration for the city's 30th birthday in 1886. I'm not sure why, but maybe the city just needed a reason to party. The 50th birthday included a dance at the Island View for 200 dressed in their elaborate best. The event was held on March 23rd, a day before the official date, perhaps so everyone would still be awake to sing Happy Birthday Bayfield at midnight. The paper said toasts were given by prominent citizens, old-timers talked, and afterwards there was a dance to music by the Zenith Orchestra. Other communities sent congratulations on the milestone, including the Iron River Press, which said, "For a town of its age, Bayfield is not so large, but it has rejuvenated to beat the band in the past year or two, and is setting a pace which indicates beyond a doubt that rheumatism and other afflictions of old age have not fastened itself upon Bayfield County's oldest city." 50 years later, the city prepared to mark its centennial. Planning meetings were held for a long time and ideas thrown around. Some people thought that having a summer-long centennial summer would be too long for men to wear beards and women to wear long dresses. So planners turned instead to plaid vests for men and matching stoles and blouses for women. It was generally accepted that events would range over 8 or 10 Sundays with different themes, such as religion in Bayfield, Strawberry Sunday, regatta, teenagers today, that must have been a fun one, apple pie picnic, homecoming, and more. A special 88-page commemorative edition of the Bayfield County Press, largely written by Eleanor Knight, was republished. And of course, the annual celebration was a typical Bayfield blowout. As Knight explained, the large-scale, all-out type of celebration has always been popular in Bayfield, and still is. Witness Apple Festival. Finally, Bayfield didn't mind if things sometimes went seriously downhill. Personally, I tend to avoid driving down Manypenny Hill. In winter, it can be slippery, and in summer, there's usually a Minnesotan pulling a boat right up the middle of the street. But years ago, there were slippery good times to be had for Bayfield kids and their sleds. Sherm and Jane Edwards, who both grew up in Bayfield, remembered Manypenny as the go-to sledding hill for both of them. The city would plow the street, but it was never perfectly clean and sanded, so there was usually enough of a snowy surface for sledding with city approval. There were fewer cars around in those years, and if someone wanted to cross Manypenny on one of the side streets, they would blink their lights and the kids would know to watch out. Sherm said sometimes it was slippery enough that we could go all the way to the Chippewa Valley Bank, and if it was really slippery, we could go all the way to where the bistro is now. The only bad thing was you had to walk back up. He dealt with that inconvenience by taking a dog collar that his father had used for winter ice fishing and harnessing his collie to pull the sled back up for him. There were other hills, of course, but Jane said Manypenny was the only one her mother would allow her and her siblings to go. It was quite popular. I never heard of anybody getting hurt. My mother knew that's where we would be, and she didn't have to worry about us. In those days, and I think we're talking the 1950s here, the whistle that now sounds at noon or a couple minutes before went off at 9 p.m. And that was the signal, as Sherm put it, to get your ass home. I think I hear that whistle now, so it's time to go. Thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it.